The briefing room at FOB Chapman smelled like burnt coffee and dust. That particular Afghan dust that got into everything no matter how many times you cleaned. Colonel Harrison stood at the front with a map that looked older than Preston, pointing at coordinates that might as well have been on Mars for all the good our GPS was doing lately. "Sergeant Armstrong, you'll be taking a supply run up to OP-31, he said, like he was asking me to grab milk from the store instead of drive through 30 miles of Taliban-controlled mountain passes. Standard resupply, medical, ammunition, rations, should take you 8 hours round trip." I nodded, already calculating the real time. 12 hours if we were lucky. 16 if we weren't. Martha Simmons sat to my left, her West Point posture making the rest of us look like we were melting into our chairs. She'd been taking notes since the briefing started, her pen moving in precise lines across the page. 2 weeks in country, and she still thought documentation mattered more than instinct. "Sir, I'm not seeing OP-31 on our digital mapping system," Martha said, holding up her tablet. Of course she'd noticed. "The coordinates place it in unmarked terrain." Harrison barely glanced at her. "Technical issues with the satellite coverage in that region, Lieutenant. Use the paper maps." I watched Martha's jaw tighten. She wanted to push it, I could tell, but she was still new enough to swallow her questions. The paper map on the wall showed OP-31 clear as day, a small triangle marking an observation post that overlooked 3 different valleys. Strategic position, assuming anyone was actually there to observe anything. Preston sat on my other side, his knee bouncing like a jackhammer. Kid had been in country 6 weeks and still jumped every time a door slammed. His hands kept moving to his rifle, then back to his lap, then to his water bottle. I'd seen that nervous energy before in green soldiers. Sometimes it kept them alive. Sometimes it got them killed. "Davenport, you're driving," I told him, and watched his knee stop bouncing for exactly 2 seconds before starting again. "Yes, Sergeant," he said, his voice cracking slightly on the second word. British accent still thick, despite his American uniform. "I've been practicing with the mountain roads in the simulator." The simulator. Jesus. Like a video game could prepare you for the way these roads crumbled under your tires or how the Taliban liked to pile rocks in spots that forced you to slow down. Evelyn Hoffman sat behind Preston, her fingers dancing across her communications equipment even during the briefing. She'd been intercepting local chatter all morning, her Pashto good enough to catch nuances that our translators missed. She looked up when she noticed me watching. "Radio traffic's been quiet around those coordinates," she said. "Almost too quiet." "Maybe they're all taking a day off," Margaret Farley said from her corner, not looking up from the medical supply list she was reviewing. "Even terrorists need vacation time." Margaret had the kind of dry humor that came from seeing too many 19-year-olds bleed out over stupid mistakes. 2 deployments as a medic, though she'd mentioned once that neither had involved much actual combat. Training accidents and heat casualties mostly. This would be different, though I wasn't about to tell her that. "We leave at 0600, Harrison continued. "Should put you at OP-31 by noon back before dark." Martha's pen stopped moving. "Sir, that timeline assumes optimal conditions and no stops. The terrain analysis suggests—" "The timeline is what it is, Lieutenant," Harrison cut her off. "Any other questions?" She had about 50. I could see them building behind her eyes like storm clouds. But she pressed her lips together and shook her head, smart enough to know when to shut up at least. After the briefing, we headed to the motor pool to prep our Humvee. The morning air was already thick with heat, that oppressive weight that made every piece of gear feel twice as heavy. Preston walked around the vehicle 3 times, checking things he'd already checked, his hands still shaking as he tested the tire pressure. "First combat mission?" I asked, though I already knew the answer. "First mission outside the wire, Sergeant," he admitted, trying to steady his hands by gripping the tire gauge tighter. "In Vermont, we didn't... the recruiting station made it sound different. They always did. Sold kids on adventure and college money, left out the parts about IEDs and watching your friends die. I wanted to tell him it would be fine, that this was just a milk run, but the words stuck in my throat. My brother had believed my lies about everything being fine, right up until he swallowed a bottle of pills while I was at basic training. Martha appeared with a stack of paper maps, spreading them across the Humvee's hood. "I've plotted 3 alternate routes," she announced. "The primary path has 2 known choke points where ambushes are statistically more likely." "We're taking the main road," I said, not looking at her charts and graphs. "It's the fastest route." "Speed isn't everything, Sergeant. A tactical analysis of—" "Lieutenant, how many supply runs have you done?" Her silence was answer enough. "We take the main road," I repeated. "The longer we're out there, the more chances they have to hit us." She folded her maps with sharp, angry movements but didn't argue further. Behind her, Evelyn was loading communication equipment into the vehicle, each piece wrapped in static-proof bags. She'd jury-rigged some kind of signal booster to the antenna, held together with electrical tape and what looked like hope. "That going to work?" I asked. "It'll work until it doesn't," she said, which was about as optimistic as anyone got around here. Margaret arrived last, dragging 2 medical bags that looked like they weighed more than Preston. She'd raided the field hospital for extra supplies, trauma kits, morphine, things we shouldn't need for a simple supply run, but would be grateful for if everything went sideways. "Planning for casualties?" Martha asked, that edge still in her voice from our earlier exchange. "Always do," Margaret replied. "Rather carry extra weight than watch someone bleed out because I didn't pack enough gauze." We loaded the rest of the supplies in silence. Cases of MREs that nobody would want to eat, ammunition for weapons that hopefully wouldn't be fired, water bottles that would be hot enough to brew tea in by noon. Preston kept checking his watch, counting down the hours until 0600 like it was an execution time. "Sergeant Armstrong," Martha said as we finished loading, "I want it on record that I believe this mission timeline is unnecessarily aggressive." "Noted," I said, though we both knew nobody gave a damn what went on record. "Anything else?" She hesitated, then pulled out her tablet again. "The last communication from OP-31 was 4 days ago. Routine check-in, nothing unusual, but 4 days is a long time to go silent." 4 days was forever in a place where things could go wrong in 4 seconds. But Harrison hadn't seemed concerned, which meant either he knew something we didn't or he didn't care. Neither option made me feel better. "Could be equipment failure," Evelyn offered. "The mountains play hell with communications." "Could be," I agreed, though my gut was already twisting into knots. That familiar feeling that something was wrong. The same instinct that had saved my squad in Kandahar and failed my brother in Boston. Preston dropped a water case, the bottles scattering across the ground. His face went red as he scrambled to collect them, apologizing over and over. Martha watched with barely concealed frustration while Margaret helped him gather the bottles. "It's fine," I told him, though my patience was already wearing thin. "Just load them up." The kid nodded, his hands shaking worse than before. I remembered being 19, thinking I was ready for war because I'd played Call of Duty and watched Band of Brothers. The reality was nothing like that. No respawns, no dramatic music, just heat and fear and the constant weight of knowing any decision could get everyone killed. "Get some sleep," I told them all. 0600 comes early. They dispersed to their quarters, leaving me alone with the Humvee and my doubts. The vehicle sat there like a metal coffin on wheels, waiting to carry us into whatever was waiting at OP-31. I ran my hand along its armored side, feeling the dings and scratches from previous missions, wondering if tomorrow would add new ones. The paper map was still spread on the hood where Martha had left it. I studied the route to OP-31, memorizing every curve and elevation change. The outpost itself was marked with that simple triangle, but something about its position bothered me. It was too isolated, too far from any support. like someone had deliberately placed it where help couldn't reach. My forearm itched suddenly, a sharp pain that made me look down. Nothing there, just sun-darkened skin and old scars. But the sensation lingered, like something crawling under the surface, trying to get out. Tomorrow would be simple, I told myself. Drive up, deliver supplies, drive back. Keep everyone alive, add another successful mission to my record, and pretend the luck would hold forever. Preston would get his first taste of the real Afghanistan. Martha would learn that theories didn't mean much when bullets started flying, and I would do what I always did, whatever it took to bring them home. The sun was setting behind the mountains, painting them the color of dried blood. Somewhere up there, OP-31 waited in silence, 30 miles and a world away from the relative safety of Chapman. I folded the map and headed to my quarters, the weight of command settling on my shoulders like a physical thing. 6 hours until we left. 6 hours to pretend I knew what I was doing, that my reputation meant something, that I could protect them all. The fear sat in my stomach like a stone. Not fear of dying. I'd made peace with that possibility years ago. Fear of failing them, of being exposed as the fraud I knew I was, of adding more names to the list of people I couldn't save. I lay on my bunk, staring at the ceiling, counting down the hours until morning. Outside, I could hear the normal sounds of the base. Helicopters landing, sergeants yelling, someone laughing at something stupid. Normal sounds for an abnormal place. The soundtrack of a war that had gone on so long nobody remembered what we were fighting for anymore. OP-31 waited in the mountains, silent and patient, and tomorrow, ready or not, we would answer its call. The smell hit us first. That sick, sweet combination of burnt flesh and cordite that meant something had died violently. We'd been climbing for 2 hours, the Humvee's engine straining against the grade while Preston white-knuckled the steering wheel around hairpin turns that dropped straight into nothing. "Stop," Evelyn said suddenly from the back, her binoculars pressed against the window. Valley floor, 10 o'clock. I grabbed my own binoculars and looked where she was pointing. The narrow valley below our route was carpeted with bodies, dozens of goats scattered across the rocky ground like broken toys. Some were still smoking. The crater patterns told the story clearly enough. Someone had called in an airstrike on what they thought was a Taliban convoy. Turned out to be a shepherd moving his flock. "Jesus," Preston whispered, his face already going pale. The kid had seen the dead woman and child from the ambush prep we'd done. But this was different. This was waste on a scale that made no sense. "Keep driving," I told him, but his foot had already come off the gas. "Are those—" He couldn't finish the question. "Goats," Margaret confirmed from her position behind him. "Probably belonged to some local family. Their entire livelihood gone." Preston pulled over so fast I nearly smashed my head on the dashboard. He was out of the vehicle and vomiting before anyone could stop him, his breakfast splashing onto the rocks. The sound echoed off the canyon walls. "We need to move," I said, scanning the ridgelines. Nothing moved up there, but stopping in the open was asking for trouble. "We should have taken the alternate route," Martha said, her voice tight with barely controlled anger. "I marked 3 different paths that would have avoided this area entirely." "Those routes would have added 4 hours minimum," I said, still watching the high ground. 4 more hours of exposure. 4 hours versus traumatizing Private Davenport? Preston climbed back into the driver's seat, wiping his mouth with the back of his hand. His eyes kept drifting to the valley below. "I'm fine," he said, though his hands shook as he put the vehicle in gear. "Why?" he asked after we'd driven another 100 meters. "Why kill animals? They're not Taliban. They're not anything." I wanted to give him an answer that made sense, something about collateral damage and the fog of war. But the truth was simpler and uglier. Someone saw movement on their thermal imaging and made a bad call. Happened all the time. We just usually didn't have to drive past the results. Sometimes people make mistakes, Margaret said when I didn't answer. Expensive, terrible mistakes. That's not a mistake, Preston said, his voice cracking. That's someone's whole life down there. Those goats were probably all they had. He wasn't wrong. In this part of Afghanistan, livestock meant the difference between eating and starving. Some family was going to return to find their future turned into carrion. "Base, this is Comms 1, Evelyn said into her radio. "Requesting confirmation on recent air activity in Grid Square." Static cut her off. She adjusted frequencies, tried again. More static. "Mountains are interfering," she said, though her frown suggested she wasn't entirely convinced. "I'm getting partial signals, then nothing." Margaret pulled out her GPS unit, trying to mark our position for the return trip. "That's weird," she muttered, showing me the screen. According to the device, we were simultaneously 5 clicks east and 3 clicks west of our actual position. "Try it again," I said. She did. This time it showed us back at Chapman. "Piece of junk," she said, shoving it back in her pack. "Good thing we have the paper map." The paper map that showed OP-31 when nothing else did. The paper map that was our only guide through terrain that seemed determined to confuse every piece of modern equipment we had. Preston had to stop again 20 minutes later, dry heaving since there was nothing left in his stomach. The dead goats had gotten to him worse than I'd expected. Maybe because they were innocent in a way that people never were in war zones. Animals didn't choose sides or carry weapons or plant IEDs. They just tried to survive, and we'd turned them into smoke and meat. "It's not right," he kept saying. "None of this is right." Martha watched him with an expression I couldn't read. Frustration, pity, understanding. She'd been so focused on tactics and timelines that I wondered if this was the first time she'd really thought about what we were doing here. "War's not about right," I told Preston. "It's about completing the mission and getting home." "Then what's the mission?" he asked. "What are we actually trying to accomplish?" Another question I couldn't answer. We were delivering supplies to an outpost that might not exist, through territory we barely controlled. In a war that had gone on so long, most people back home had forgotten we were still here. "The mission is OP-31, I said, because it was easier than admitting I didn't know either. Evelyn tried the radio again as we climbed higher. She got fragments, someone talking about weather patterns, another voice requesting medical evacuation, then nothing but white noise that hurt to listen to. "I've never seen interference this bad," she said. "It's like the mountains are eating the signals." The road narrowed as we climbed, barely wide enough for the Humvee. On our left, the mountain rose in a sheer wall of gray stone. On our right, the drop had to be 300 feet straight down. Preston's knuckles were white on the steering wheel, and I could hear him breathing in short, sharp gasps. "You're doing fine," I told him, though my own hand was gripping the door handle hard enough to leave marks. "GPS is completely dead now," Margaret announced. "Not even giving false readings, just nothing." I looked at the paper map spread across my lap. We were maybe halfway to OP-31, assuming the distances were accurate. The route ahead showed more of the same, narrow mountain roads, steep grades, and isolation that grew more complete with every mile. "There," Martha said suddenly, pointing ahead. "Is that a checkpoint?" I looked where she was indicating. A cluster of rocks had been arranged across part of the road, forcing vehicles to slow and weave between them. Classic Taliban tactic, make you slow down, make you predictable. "Preston, don't stop," I said. "Just weave through." "What if there's an IED? Then stopping won't help." He threaded the Humvee between the rocks, all of us holding our breath. Nothing exploded. Nobody started shooting. Just rocks in the road, maybe placed by insurgents, maybe just fallen from the cliffs above. The sun was directly overhead now, turning the inside of the vehicle into an oven despite the air conditioning. Sweat ran down Preston's face, dripping onto his uniform. Margaret passed water bottles forward, reminding everyone to hydrate. "How did they even build an outpost up here?" Martha asked, studying the map. "There's no infrastructure, no supply lines, nothing." "Same way they built everything else in this country," I said, "slowly and badly." But she had a point. OP-31's position made no tactical sense. Too isolated to support other operations, too exposed to properly defend, too far from anything worth observing. Unless there was something up here we didn't know about. Something worth putting 12 soldiers on a mountaintop with no backup. My forearm itched suddenly, that same sharp sensation from yesterday. I scratched at it absently, focused on the map. We were entering the truly remote section now, where even the locals rarely went. The kind of place where you could disappear and never be found. "I'm scared," Preston said quietly. So quietly I almost missed it. "Good," I told him. "Means you're paying attention." "Were you scared on your first mission?" I thought about lying, giving him the tough sergeant routine, but the kid deserved better than that. "Terrified," I admitted. "Threw up 3 times before we even left the wire." "Did it get easier?" "No, you just get better at functioning while scared." Evelyn had given up on the radio, switching to monitoring local frequencies for any chatter. But even those were silent, like we'd driven off the edge of the world into some pocket of reality where electromagnetic waves didn't exist. The road curved ahead, disappearing around a massive boulder. As we rounded it, the landscape opened up into a vista that made everyone go quiet. Mountains stretched in every direction, raw and hostile and completely indifferent to our presence. Somewhere up there, OP-31 waited in its impossible location, silent as the radio frequencies Evelyn couldn't raise. 2 more hours, I said, checking the map again. Maybe 3. Nobody responded. We all knew those were optimistic estimates. The road was getting worse, our equipment was failing one piece at a time, and Preston looked like he might bolt from the vehicle if we stopped again. But we kept climbing, because that's what soldiers do. We follow orders and complete missions, even when those missions stop making sense, even when the mountains themselves seem to want us gone. The dead goats were miles behind us now, but I knew Preston was still thinking about them. Hell, I was too. All that death for nothing. A mistake that would be written off as collateral damage in some report nobody would read. Maybe that's what we were. Collateral damage that just hadn't happened yet, driving toward an outpost that shouldn't exist through mountains that swallowed radio signals and confused satellites. But we kept driving anyway. The paper map our only guide. Deeper into territory that felt less like Afghanistan and more like the edge of something else entirely. The woman appeared around the bend like she'd materialized from the rock itself, just standing there in the middle of the road, holding something wrapped in dirty cloth against her chest. I had my hand on Preston's shoulder before he could even think about braking. "Don't stop," I said, but he was already slowing down. "There's a woman. I see her. Keep driving." "Sergeant, she has a child," Martha said from behind me, already reaching for the door handle. "We can't just—" "Yes, we can." I kept my rifle pointed forward, watching the ridgelines. This was textbook. Lone woman, distressed, middle of nowhere. They'd been running this place since the Soviets were here. The woman started walking toward us, her voice carrying over the engine noise. Desperate, pleading sounds that didn't need translation. "She's asking for help," Evelyn said anyway, her Pashto picking up the words. "Her child is sick. She says her child is dying." Preston had stopped completely now, the Humvee idling 20 meters from the woman. She kept coming, that bundle in her arms, her face streaked with dirt or tears, or both. "We're combat soldiers, not a medical convoy," I said, but Martha was already unbuckling her harness. "We have medical supplies. Margaret's a trained medic. What kind of people are we if we don't—" "Alive people," I cut her off. "This is exactly how they—" "How they what?" How desperate mothers try to save their children. Martha's voice had that West Point righteousness that made me want to shake her. Not everything is a threat, Sergeant. The woman was closer now, maybe 10 meters. I could see the bundle more clearly, small, too still. Something was wrong with how she was holding it. Too stiff, too careful. Stay in the vehicle, I said, opening my door. Sergeant, Martha started. That's an order, Lieutenant. I stepped out, rifle ready but not quite aimed at her. The sun hit me like a physical weight, and I could feel sweat already running down my back. The woman stopped when she saw me, started talking faster. Evelyn translated through the open window. Please, she says, please. Her son is very sick. She walked from her village. She needs medicine. I moved closer, watching her hands, watching the ridgelines, watching everything except what I should have been watching. The bundle. Always watch the bundle. 5 meters away, I saw it clearly. The child's face, gray and waxy, eyes half open but seeing nothing. That kid had been dead for hours, maybe days. The woman kept talking, kept pleading, but her eyes weren't looking at me. They were looking past me, up at the rocks. The rifle was already moving when I saw the vest. Wires running from under the child's wrapping to something strapped around the woman's chest. She saw me see it, and her hand moved toward the dead kid's body where the trigger probably was. The shot came from somewhere high and to our left. The woman's head snapped back, and she crumpled like someone had cut her strings. The child's body rolled free, and I saw the whole thing, blocks of explosive taped to its tiny chest, the woman's vest connected by a single wire, the trigger mechanism clutched in her dead hand. Then the world exploded into noise. Automatic weapons fire from 3 positions, left ridge, right ridge, directly ahead. I hit the ground and rolled behind a rock that wasn't nearly big enough, rounds sparking off the road where I'd been standing. Contact left, contact right, contact front, I heard myself yelling. Already returning fire at muzzle flashes I could barely see. The Humvee's engine roared. Preston threw it in reverse, tires screaming, then forward, then a hard turn that nearly tipped us. He was driving like a maniac, which was exactly right. Moving targets are harder to hit. Where's the sergeant? Martha's voice over the gunfire. I'm here! I scrambled toward the vehicle as Preston swung it around again, the armor plating singing with bullet impacts. Dove through the door Margaret had kicked open, landing hard on the floor. Evelyn, get us some fucking air support, I shouted. She was already on it, calm as ice, coordinates flowing from her mouth into the radio. Hellhound Base, this is Comms 1, troops in contact, grid. An RPG screamed overhead, exploding against the cliff face and showering us with rocks. Preston yanked the wheel left and we all slammed into each other. I can't see them, he was screaming. I can't see where they are. Just drive. I got myself oriented, started putting rounds toward the muzzle flashes. Martha was doing the same from the other side, her West Point training finally worth something. Margaret had her rifle up too, but then Martha grunted and pulled her arm back. I'm hit, she said, almost surprised. Margaret was on her immediately, cutting away the sleeve. Shrapnel, not a bullet, you'll live. This is your fault, Margaret said to me while she worked. You never should have gotten out. She was right. I'd broken my own rule. Let the image of a desperate mother override my instincts. Except she hadn't been a mother anymore, just another weapon. And the kid had been dead before we ever showed up. They'd strapped explosives to a corpse and sent a woman to die with it. 2 minutes to air support, Evelyn announced, still impossibly calm. 2 minutes is forever in a firefight. Preston kept us moving, jerking the wheel seemingly at random, but actually following a pattern that made us unpredictable. Kid had been playing video games after all. Turned out some of those reflexes translated. I counted muzzle flashes, 6 shooters, maybe 7. Standard Taliban ambush team. They'd expected us to stop, cluster around the woman, make ourselves an easy target. When that failed, they'd shifted to plan B, pin us down and wait for an RPG to get lucky. Another rocket screamed past, closer this time. Preston jerked the wheel, and we tilted up on 2 wheels before slamming back down. "Where's that air support?" Martha asked through gritted teeth, Margaret still working on her arm. Then I heard it, that beautiful sound of salvation. Rotor blades coming in fast and low. The Apache came over the ridge like an angry metal angel, and the ambusher's fire shifted toward it. Big mistake. The helicopter's cannon opened up, and pieces of the ridge started disappearing. The shooting stopped as suddenly as it had started. One moment chaos. The next, just the sound of the Apache circling and our own heavy breathing. "Clear," Evelyn reported after checking with the Apache crew. 6 hostiles down, no movement detected. 6. I'd counted right. Preston finally stopped the vehicle, his hands shaking so bad he couldn't get it into park. He was crying, I realized, just tears running down his face while he stared straight ahead. "You did good," I told him. "That driving saved us." He nodded but didn't speak. Couldn't, probably. Martha's arm was bandaged, the bleeding stopped. She was staring at me with an expression I couldn't read. Not anger exactly, but something close to it. "The child was already dead," I said, not sure why I needed to explain. "I know," she said quietly. "I saw. They used a corpse." Preston finally spoke, his voice hollow. "They put bombs on a dead child. Nobody had an answer for that. What could you say? That this was war? That people did horrible things? That a dead kid was just another tool to kill Americans?" The woman's body lay in the road ahead of us, the child's corpse still wrapped in its explosive vest nearby. We'd have to call EOD to clear it before anyone could use this road again. The Apache continued circling, watching for any more threats. "We need to move," I said. "OP-31 is still 2 hours away." "After this?" Margaret looked at me like I was insane. "We should go back. Our mission hasn't changed." "Everything's changed," she said. "They knew we were coming. This was planned." She was right about that too. This ambush had been waiting for us specifically, which meant either we'd been watched since leaving Chapman, or someone had leaked our route. Neither option was good. "We continue to OP-31, I said, making it an order. "Preston, can you drive?" He wiped his face, nodded. His hands were steadier now, that weird calm that sometimes comes after combat. "The child," he said again, not really a question. "I know," I said. "I saw it too." We drove around the bodies, giving them a wide berth in case of secondary devices. The Apache followed us for another 10 minutes before peeling off, called to some other emergency. Evelyn thanked them over the radio, professional and composed like the last 12 minutes hadn't happened. My forearm was burning again, that same sharp pain from before. When I looked down, there was a thin black line running from my wrist toward my elbow. Not a vein exactly, but something like it. I pulled my sleeve down before anyone could notice. The mountains rose around us, indifferent to what had just happened. Somewhere up there, OP-31 waited in its impossible location. We'd lost time with the ambush, and the sun was already past its peak. We'd be driving back in darkness now, assuming we made it back at all. "Why?" Preston asked suddenly. "Why use a dead child?" "Because it works," Martha answered before I could. "Because they know we'll stop for women and children. Because they're counting on our humanity." "Then, what's the point?" His voice was rising, heading toward hysteria. "If helping people gets us killed, if not helping makes us monsters, what's the fucking point?" I wanted to give him an answer. Something about duty, or protecting democracy, or fighting terrorism. But all I could think about was that dead kid, turned into a weapon by people who were supposed to protect him. "The point is, we complete the mission," I said finally. "We deliver the supplies, we check on OP-31, and we get home." It wasn't enough. I knew it wasn't enough, but it was all I had. We kept climbing into the mountains, the road getting narrower, the drop-offs getting steeper. Behind us, EOD would be heading to clear the bodies and the explosives. The official report would list it as a failed ambush, 6 enemy KIA, 1 minor friendly injury. It wouldn't mention the child. It never mentioned the children. The tire tracks appeared maybe 50 meters past where OP-31 should have been. Just 2 faint lines cutting up through the rocks at an angle that made my teeth hurt to look at. We'd been circling the coordinates for 10 minutes, Evelyn cycling through every frequency while I checked and rechecked the paper map like the triangle marking might suddenly move to match reality. "This is Comms 1 calling observation post 3-1. Please respond." Evelyn's voice had gone flat, professional. She'd said it maybe 20 times now. "OP-31, this is supply convoy from Chapman, requesting confirmation of position." Static. Always static. "We're in the right place," I said, though the empty mountainside suggested otherwise. Just rocks and scrub brush where 12 soldiers should have been living and working. GPS might be wrong, but these paper coordinates are exact. "Then where's the outpost?" Martha asked, and for once I didn't have a smart answer. Preston was leaning forward, squinting through the windshield. "Sergeant, those look like tire marks." I followed his gaze. He was right. Barely visible in the dust, leading up a slope that looked too steep for vehicles. The incline wasn't on our map. Hell, according to our map, that whole section of mountain didn't exist. "Could be from a previous patrol," Margaret said, but she didn't sound convinced. "Previous patrol to where?" I grabbed my binoculars, traced the tracks as far as I could see. They disappeared around a rock formation about 200 meters up. "There's nothing up there." "According to the map," Martha said, "which is already proven unreliable." She had that look again, the one that meant she was about to quote some regulation or tactical manual at me. I cut her off before she could start. "We follow the tracks. That exceeds our mission parameters. We're supposed to deliver supplies to OP-31, not go exploring unmarked mountain trails. OP-31 isn't where it's supposed to be. Those tracks are our only lead." "Our lead to what?" "We should contact base, request clarification." "With what radio?" I pointed at Evelyn, who was still getting nothing but white noise. "We're already here. We check it out." Preston put the Humvee in gear before Martha could argue further. The engine strained against the grade, tires spinning for grip on the loose rock. The incline was brutal. Maybe 30 degrees, the kind of slope that would flip us if Preston made one wrong move. "Easy," I told him, though he was already doing everything right. Kid learned fast. The tracks led us around the rock formation and up another 100 meters before leveling out onto a narrow shelf cut into the mountainside. And there it was, OP-31, built right into the mountain like it had grown from the stone itself. "How the hell?" Margaret breathed. The outpost was invisible from below, hidden by the natural curve of the mountain and painted in colors that matched the surrounding rock perfectly. Even knowing it was there, I had to focus to see where the fortifications ended and the mountain began. Whoever had designed this position knew what they were doing. "That's why it wasn't on the digital maps," Evelyn said. "Satellite imagery wouldn't pick this up. It's completely concealed from above." The main gate stood open. Not damaged, not forced. Just open, like someone had forgotten to close it on their way out. That was wrong. You didn't leave gates open in Afghanistan. Not ever. "Where are the sentries?" Martha asked. Good question. An outpost this size should have at least 2 guards visible, probably more in concealed positions. But nothing moved except dust in the wind. Preston rolled us through the gate slowly, all of us scanning for threats. The compound was bigger than I'd expected. Multiple buildings dug into the mountainside, reinforced positions overlooking the approach, even a helicopter landing pad carved from solid rock. Everything a remote outpost needed to survive indefinitely, except people. "I don't like this," Preston said, and his voice had that edge again, the one from after the ambush. Neither did I. My skin was crawling, that feeling you get when you're being watched, except worse. like the air itself was wrong somehow. Too thick, too still, too something I couldn't name. We stopped in the compound's center, a flat area maybe 30 meters across. Personal equipment lay scattered around, rucksacks, water bottles, someone's rifle propped against a wall like they'd just set it down for a second. A half-eaten MRE sat on a crate, the spoon still stuck in the beef stew. "Evelyn, try the radio again," I said. She did, cycling through emergency frequencies, command channels, even trying to raise the Apache that had saved us earlier. Nothing. Not even static now. Just dead air. "It's not atmospheric," she said quietly. "Something's blocking us. Jamming maybe, but more sophisticated than anything the Taliban has." "Could be the mountain," Margaret suggested. "All this rock around us." Maybe. But I'd been in mountain outposts before, and they always had communication solutions. Relay stations, signal boosters, something. This felt deliberate. "Preston, Margaret, stay with the vehicle," I said. "Keep the engine running. Anything happens, you get out of here." "What about waiting for you?" Preston asked. "You don't wait. Something goes wrong, you drive back to Chapman and report." He nodded, but I could see him fighting not to argue. Good. Meant he was thinking beyond just following orders. "Martha, Evelyn, we checked the main buildings. Quick sweep, see if we can find anyone or figure out what happened." Martha was already moving, her rifle ready despite her bandaged arm. Evelyn grabbed her equipment bag, probably thinking she might find a working radio inside. The first building was the command post, door standing open like the gate. Maps covered one wall, marking patrol routes and supply drops. A coffee pot sat on a field stove, still warm. The coffee inside had maybe an hour left before it went completely cold. "They were just here," Martha said, touching the pot. "This is fresh." The duty roster showed 12 names, all present and accounted for as of this morning's check-in. But check-in with who? Evelyn hadn't been able to raise them for days. The second building was a supply depot, exactly where we were supposed to deliver our cargo. Plenty of space for what we'd brought, shelves already half-stocked with ammunition and MREs. Normal, except for the box of rifle rounds spilled across the floor like someone had knocked it over while leaving in a hurry. "Sergeant," Evelyn called from across the compound. She'd found the communications shack, a small reinforced building bristling with antennas. Inside, every piece of equipment was powered on and functioning. The radios showed good signal strength, all frequencies clear. But when Evelyn tried to transmit, nothing happened. Not broken, not jammed, just nothing, like the signals were being swallowed before they could leave the building. "This is impossible," she said, checking connections and power supplies. "Everything's working perfectly, but it's not actually working." My forearm started burning again, that sharp pain spreading up toward my elbow. When I glanced down, the black line had grown maybe an inch, branching now like a tiny lightning bolt frozen under my skin. I pulled my sleeve down before the others noticed. "We need to check the barracks," Martha said. "That's where they'd be if they're not on duty." I knew she was right, but something in me really didn't want to open that door. The feeling of wrongness was getting stronger, pressing against my skull like a headache that hadn't quite started yet. The barracks door was closed but not locked. I reached for the handle, and the metal was cold. Too cold for the afternoon sun that had been baking everything else. "Wait," I said, though I wasn't sure why. Just that instinct again, the one that had saved me before, and failed me too. But Martha was already pushing past me, determined to find answers. She opened the door, and the smell hit us immediately. Not death exactly, but something else. Something that made my brain refuse to process what I was seeing, even as my eyes took it in. "Oh God," Evelyn whispered behind me. The barracks was full of soldiers, all 12 of them, according to the duty roster. They were in their bunks, looking almost peaceful, like they'd just laid down for a nap, except for the black veins spreading across their skin like someone had drawn on them with dark ink. The same kind of mark growing on my arm, but covering their entire bodies in intricate patterns that hurt to look at directly. Martha stepped forward, reaching toward the nearest body, and I grabbed her wrist. "Don't touch them. We need to check if any are alive." "They're not." I knew it with absolute certainty. Whatever had killed these men, they'd been dead for hours. Maybe since this morning's check-in that never actually happened. What could do this? Martha's voice had gone clinical, trying to process the impossible. Chemical weapon, biological agent. I didn't answer because I didn't know. But my arm was burning worse now, the black line pulsing in time with my heartbeat. And somewhere in the back of my mind I could almost hear something. Not quite a voice, not quite music, but something that wanted my attention. "We need to leave," I said. "Now." For once, Martha didn't argue. We backed out of the barracks slowly, like the dead might wake up if we made too much noise. Martha was already pulling on her gloves, the latex snapping against her wrists. "Everyone check your gear," she said, her West Point training kicking in hard. Masks, gloves, full protective protocol. This could be biological. But I knew it wasn't. Don't ask me how, I just knew. Whatever had killed these men, it wasn't something we could filter out with standard NBC gear. The black veins spreading across their skin looked almost artistic, like someone had painted them there with careful, deliberate strokes. "We need to document this," Evelyn said, already pulling out her camera. She started taking photos with the same calm efficiency she used for everything, but I could see her hands trembling slightly. "Intel will want to see..." "Intel won't believe it," Margaret cut in. She was crouched next to one of the bodies, not touching but examining closely. "Look at this pattern. It's symmetrical. Biological agents don't create symmetrical patterns." She was right. The black veins on each soldier matched perfectly. Same spread pattern, same density, same weird way they seemed to pulse even though the men had been dead for hours, maybe days. "Don't touch them," I said again, though Margaret was being careful. Wasn't planning on it. She stood up, brushed dust off her knees. "But Sergeant, these men didn't die fighting. Look, their weapons are racked, boots placed neatly by their bunks. They went to sleep and never woke up." I moved deeper into the barracks, trying not to look at the faces. Young guys, most of them. Probably excited about their remote posting, thinking they'd see some real action up here in the mountains. Instead, they died in their sleep from something that left marks like infected tattoos. On a makeshift desk, really just a board across 2 ammo crates, I found letters. Half-finished, most of them. One guy writing to his mom about the food. Another telling his girlfriend about the sunrise from up here, how you could see forever when the morning light hit just right. "Sir," Preston's voice crackled over the radio from outside. "How much longer? This place it's really messing with my head." "Few more minutes," I told him, though I wanted out just as bad. Martha had moved to the next building, what looked like a command post. I followed her in, Evelyn right behind with her camera. More of the same. Soldiers at their posts, slumped over radios and maps, those black veins crawling across any exposed skin. "The communications equipment," Evelyn said, moving to the radio setup. "It's all still powered, still functional. They were in the middle of transmitting when..." She pulled up the logs, fingers flying over the keyboard. The entries were routine at first, supply requests, weather reports, the boring stuff that fills military communications. Then, 3 days ago, something different. "Listen to this," Evelyn said, reading from the screen. 0800 hours, breakthrough in lower tunnels. Team 3 reports significant archaeological discovery, requesting guidance from command. "Archaeological?" Martha leaned over her shoulder. "What were they digging for?" Evelyn scrolled further. 0930 hours, proceeding with excavation despite lack of response from command. Find is too significant to delay. Greek inscriptions confirmed. "Greek," I said. "In Afghanistan?" Alexander the Great came through here, Martha said, her brain already spinning. His armies built settlements, left artifacts. But that was over 2,000 years ago. More entries, getting progressively more excited. They'd found something big down there. Structures, artifacts, things that shouldn't exist this far from any known historical sites. The last entry was barely coherent. 21:47 hours. We opened it. God help us, we opened it. The dreams were true. She's been waiting so long. That was it. Nothing after that. She? Martha asked. I didn't answer because my arm was burning again, worse than before. The black line had spread another inch while we'd been investigating, and now it was starting to branch. Just like the marks on the dead soldiers. We need to leave, I said. We need to investigate those tunnels, Martha countered immediately. If they found something down there that killed them, we need to know what it was. For our own safety, if nothing else. Our safety depends on getting out of here. Our safety depends on information. We can't report back with 12 soldiers died of mysterious black veins, no further details. Command will send another team and another until someone figures out what happened. She was right, and I hated that she was right. But every instinct I had was screaming at me to run. To get my team out before whatever killed these soldiers, decided we'd make good additions to the collection. The excavation logs, Margaret said from across the room. She'd found a stack of notebooks filled with careful drawings and measurements. They were mapping something. Look, tunnels extending from behind the outpost going deep into the mountain. The drawings were detailed, professional. These weren't random soldiers playing archaeologist. Someone had trained them, given them specific instructions on what to look for and how to document it. This was their real mission, I said, understanding flooding through me. The observation post was just cover. They were here to dig. For what? Evelyn asked. I thought about the entry, Greek inscriptions, archaeological discovery, something about dreams. None of it made sense, but then nothing about this mission had made sense from the beginning. OP-31 hidden off the maps, positioned in the middle of nowhere, 12 soldiers dead from something that shouldn't exist. Sergeant, Preston's voice over the radio again, higher pitched now. There's something moving up here. I can't see what, but there's definitely... The transmission cut to static. Preston, I keyed my radio. Preston, report. Nothing. We ran for the door, all of us. That careful documentation forgotten in the need to check on our teammate. Outside, the Humvee sat exactly where we'd left it, engines still running. Preston was in the driver's seat, hands on the wheel, staring straight ahead. Preston. I approached carefully, rifle ready for whatever had spooked him. He turned to look at me and his eyes were wrong, not damaged, not infected, just empty, like he was looking through me at something 1,000 yards away. I can hear her, he said, his voice flat and strange. She's singing. Don't you hear her singing? Preston, snap out of it. Margaret was there immediately, checking his pupils, his pulse. He's in shock. We need to get him out of here. But I could hear it too, now that Preston had mentioned it. Not singing exactly, but something like it. A rhythm in the air, in the rocks, in the beating of my own heart. My arm pulsed with each note, the black line spreading like it was keeping time with music only the marked could hear. Load up, I ordered. We're leaving, now. The tunnels, Martha started, can wait for a properly equipped team. We're not archaeologists, Lieutenant. We're soldiers, and our job is to survive and report. She wanted to argue. I could see it in her face. But Preston's empty stare and the 12 dead soldiers had finally convinced her. We loaded our supplies quickly, nobody talking about how we were leaving them here with the corpses. The medical supplies and ammunition meant for living soldiers would sit in a depot full of the dead. Preston moved to the passenger seat without being asked, his movements mechanical. Margaret drove, her jaw clenched tight. The rest of us kept weapons ready, watching the rocks and shadows for whatever Preston thought he'd seen. As we pulled through the gate, I looked back at OP-31 one last time. It squatted there against the mountain like it had grown from the stone, keeping its secrets. Somewhere beneath it, tunnels led down to something the soldiers had found and opened, something that had killed them with marks that matched the spreading stain on my arm. "She's still singing," Preston said quietly, and I pretended not to hear him. We drove down that impossible incline in silence, each of us processing what we'd seen in our own way. Martha was already composing her report in her head, I could tell. Evelyn reviewed her photos, making sure the evidence was clear. Margaret kept checking the mirrors, watching Preston with medical concern. And me? I pressed my hand against my arm, feeling the heat of that black mark through my sleeve. Whatever those soldiers had found, whatever they'd opened, it wasn't done with us yet. I could feel it calling, pulling at something deep in my chest. The dead soldiers would be found eventually. Another team would come, would investigate those tunnels, would find whatever Greek impossibility waited in the darkness. But that was future pain, future disaster. Right now, I just needed to get my team home. The tunnel entrance was exactly where the excavation logs said it would be, a narrow gap behind the supply depot that looked more like a natural cave formation until you got close enough to see the tool marks. Fresh ones from the dead soldiers, sure, but underneath those were older cuts in the stone. Way older. "This isn't Taliban work," Martha said, running her hand along the smooth walls just inside the entrance. "Look at these surfaces. They've been polished." She was right. The stone had been worked until it was almost glass smooth, catching our flashlight beams and throwing them back in weird angles. I'd seen plenty of mountain tunnels in Afghanistan, rough things hacked out for storage or ambush positions. This was something else entirely. "We should tell Preston and Margaret," Evelyn said, already fiddling with her radio. "Let them know we're going underground." But the radio was dead. Not static dead like before, completely dead, like someone had yanked the battery out. "Equipment failure?" Martha asked. Evelyn shook her head, checking connections and power levels. "Everything's working. It just won't transmit." Great. We were about to go underground with no way to contact our backup. Every tactical manual ever written would call this stupid. But Martha was already moving deeper into the tunnel, her flashlight cutting through the darkness ahead. "Lieutenant, we should reconsider. Those soldiers found something down here that killed them," she interrupted. "If we don't figure out what, Command will just send another team. And another. How many people die before someone finally investigates properly?" I wanted to argue, but she had that look again. The one that meant she'd made up her mind and was just waiting for me to catch up. Plus, my arm was pulling me forward, that black line pulsing with each step deeper into the mountain, like it recognized this place. The tunnel sloped down at a steady angle, not steep enough to need ropes, but enough that you felt it in your calves after a few minutes. The air changed as we descended. Colder, yeah, but also wrong in a way that made my teeth ache. It tasted like copper pennies and old electricity. "Anyone else having trouble breathing?" Evelyn asked, her voice tight. We all were, not gasping or anything dramatic, just that each breath felt like work. Like the air down here didn't want to be in our lungs. The tunnel opened up after maybe 50 meters, and Martha stopped so suddenly I almost ran into her. "Holy shit," she breathed, and Martha never swore. The chamber was massive, bigger than the entire outpost above us. Our flashlights barely reached the far walls, but what we could see made no sense. Columns carved from solid rock, decorated with patterns that looked Greek but felt older. Stone reliefs showing battles between figures that might have been gods or might have been something else. All of it carved with a precision that modern tools would struggle to match. "This can't be here," Evelyn said, her voice small. "The Greeks never made it this far, into Afghanistan. Alexander's empire stopped hundreds of miles west. Someone made it, I said, moving toward the center of the chamber where modern equipment lay scattered around. Picks, brushes, notebooks, all the tools of a careful excavation. The dead soldiers had been working down here for weeks, maybe months, documenting everything. I picked up one of the notebooks, flipping through pages of measurements and sketches. The handwriting was neat, professional. These guys had known what they were doing. "Listen to this," I said, reading from an entry dated 5 days ago. "The inscriptions are definitely Greek, but the dialect is wrong, older than anything in the historical record. Dr. Whitman back at Georgetown thinks we might have found a pre-Alexandrian settlement, but that's impossible. The Greeks didn't have the technology to build something like this." "Dr. Whitman?" Martha grabbed another notebook. "They were consulting with academics. Looks like it. This whole thing was planned." I kept reading. "Colonel Harrison knows we've found something significant but keeps pushing us to work faster. Says we need results before the inspection team arrives next month." Harrison. Our Harrison, who'd sent us on this supply run without mentioning that OP-31 was sitting on top of an archaeological site that shouldn't exist. "Sergeant," Evelyn called from across the chamber. "You need to see this." She was standing at the far end, her flashlight trained on something that made my skin crawl before I even saw it clearly. As we got closer, the feeling got worse, like static electricity building up before a lightning strike. It was a door, massive, maybe 3 meters tall, carved from a single piece of stone that didn't match anything else in the chamber. The surface was covered in Greek text, but also symbols that looked older, more primitive. Around the edges, I could see fresh scratches and pry marks where someone had been working to open it. "They got it open," Martha said, pointing to gaps around the edges where the door had been forced from its frame. "Whatever killed them, it was behind this door." The notebooks confirmed it. The last entries were excited, almost manic. They'd been working on the door for days, trying to translate the inscriptions while carefully prying at the ancient seals. The final entry, written in a shaky hand: "We did it. The door's opening. The dreams make sense now. She's been calling to us all along." "She?" Evelyn asked. "Same as the communication logs mentioned?" I didn't answer because I was staring at one particular line of Greek text that Evelyn had started translating. Even with my limited knowledge, I could make out a few words: warning, discord, punishment. "It's a warning," Evelyn confirmed, her finger tracing the ancient letters. "Something about not disturbing those who bring discord. And this part, eternal punishment for trespassers." "They ignored it," Martha said. "Opened the door anyway." "Or couldn't help themselves," I said quietly, thinking about the pull I felt, the way my feet wanted to move toward that dark gap where the door stood partially open. We stood there for a moment, 3 soldiers with good sense staring at a door that radiated wrongness. We should have left. Should have sealed the tunnel and reported back that the site was contaminated, dangerous, off limits. That's what training said. That's what logic said. But my arm was burning now, the black line pulsing so hard I could see it through my sleeve. And somewhere past that door, something was waiting. Something that had killed 12 soldiers but had marked me instead of killing me. "We need to know," Martha said finally. "We can't report back without understanding what happened." She was right and wrong at the same time. We needed to know, but not for the reasons she thought. I needed to know why I was marked, why Preston could hear singing, why this whole mission felt like it had been orchestrated from the beginning. "Stay together," I said. "Nobody goes anywhere alone. We look, we document, we leave. No touching anything." Martha nodded, already pulling on latex gloves like they'd protect her from whatever was beyond that door. Evelyn readied her camera, though I doubted any photo would capture what we were about to see. I approached the door slowly, fighting every instinct that told me to run. The gap was just wide enough for a person to squeeze through. The soldiers had been careful not to damage it more than necessary. Professional to the end. My flashlight beam penetrated maybe 3 meters into the darkness beyond before being swallowed completely. not blocked or reflected. Swallowed, like the darkness was hungry for light. "There's something in there," Evelyn whispered, and she was right. Not something moving or breathing, but something present. Something that had been waiting a very long time for visitors. I thought about the 12 dead soldiers with their spreading black veins. Thought about Preston in the Humvee, hearing songs nobody else could hear. Thought about my own mark, growing stronger with each step toward this ancient door. "We go in together," I said, though every word felt like a lie. Whatever was waiting beyond that door, it wasn't waiting for all of us. It was waiting for me. The darkness beyond the door wasn't just absence of light. It was something thick and hungry that seemed to pull at my flashlight beam. I squeezed through the gap, ignoring Martha's sharp, "Sergeant, what the hell are you doing?" I couldn't answer her. Couldn't explain that my feet were moving without my permission, that something in my chest was pulling me forward like a fishhook through my ribs. The black line on my arm burned cold, spreading another half-inch as I crossed the threshold. "Ryan!" Martha grabbed my arm, using my first name for the first time since we'd met. "This is exactly what killed those soldiers. We need to leave, now." She was right. Of course she was right. But being right didn't matter when every cell in my body was screaming at me to keep going, to see what was calling me. "Just give me a minute," I managed to say, though the words felt thick and wrong in my mouth. "Need to see what they found." "We've seen enough," Evelyn said from behind us, her voice high and scared. "Dead soldiers, ancient ruins, warning inscriptions. What else do you need?" But then my flashlight caught the space beyond the door, and we all went quiet. It was a city, an actual city, carved from the living rock of the mountain. Streets stretched out in perfect grid patterns, lined with buildings that looked like they'd been transplanted from ancient Athens. Columns and pediments and architectural details that shouldn't exist this far from Greece, this deep underground, this perfectly preserved after 2,000 years. "That's not possible," Martha breathed, her grip on my arm loosening. The dust was thick, undisturbed, except for a clear path where the OP-31 soldiers had walked. Their boot prints led straight down what looked like a main avenue, between rows of empty stone houses with dark doorways that watched us like eyes. "How big is this place?" Evelyn whispered, panning her flashlight across the impossible space. The beam disappeared into darkness without finding a far wall. I started walking before I made the decision to move. Martha cursed and followed, then Evelyn, because leaving me alone in here was apparently worse than coming with me. Our footsteps echoed wrong, too many echoes, like the sound was bouncing off surfaces we couldn't see. The buildings were perfect, no decay, no collapsed roofs, no vegetation breaking through the streets, like the whole city had been sealed in a bubble the day it was built. But the windows were empty, the doorways dark, and the silence was so complete it made my ears ring. "This would have taken decades to build," Martha said, her analytical mind trying to process what we were seeing. "Hundreds of workers, supply lines. There should be records, evidence, something. Unless they didn't want it found," I said, surprised I could still form coherent thoughts with that pull getting stronger with each step. The main avenue led straight to the city's heart, where a temple rose above everything else. Massive columns supported a triangular pediment decorated with carved figures I didn't want to look at too closely. The OP-31 boot prints led right to its entrance. "We should go back," Evelyn said. "Document what we've found and let someone else." "There is no one else," I heard myself say. "We're here. We're already exposed to whatever killed them. Might as well know what we're dealing with." It was logical bullshit, and we all knew it. But I was already climbing the temple steps. They were worn smooth in the center, like thousands of feet had climbed them over centuries. But not recently. Not until the soldiers had come. The temple doors, bronze or something that looked like bronze, stood open. The metal was green with age but not corroded, decorated with scenes of chaos and discord. Wars, storms, serpents eating their own tails, cheerful stuff. Inside, the space opened up into a vast hall lit by nothing. There was light, dim and gray, but no source for it. Just enough to see the massive statue at the far end. She was beautiful and terrible at the same time. A woman carved from black stone, maybe 30 feet tall, seated on a throne. Her face was serene, almost kind, but her hair was a mass of serpents frozen mid-writhe. Her hands rested on the throne's arms, and even in stone they looked like they could reach out and grab you. Medusa? Evelyn guessed, but that wasn't right. Medusa was a monster. This was something else. Something that had chosen to look like a monster. The pull in my chest was almost painful now, dragging me toward the statue. My team followed, their footsteps reluctant but steady. Good soldiers, following their sergeant into whatever nightmare this was. When we were maybe 10 feet from the statue's base, a voice filled the temple. Not loud, not echoing, just suddenly there in our heads, like it had always been there. "Welcome," it said in perfect, unaccented English. "I've been waiting for one who seeks understanding." Martha raised her rifle instinctively, though there was nothing to shoot at. Evelyn grabbed my arm, trying to pull me back, but I was already stepping forward, drawn by something stronger than fear or common sense. "The others came seeking treasure or knowledge," the voice continued, amused and ancient. "But you come seeking purpose. How refreshing." The statue's eyes opened, not cracked or shifted, opened like living eyes, fixing directly on me. They were gold, bright as fresh coins, and looking into them was like staring into the sun if the sun could see you back. "Sergeant, we need to run," Martha said, but her voice sounded far away, muffled like she was speaking through water. "Run where?" the statue asked, and now her stone lips were moving, just slightly, just enough to be horrifying. "Back to your little war, your meaningless missions, your slow decay into purposeless violence?" She wasn't wrong. That was the worst part. Every word hit like truth. "You've felt it," she continued, those golden eyes never leaving mine. "The futility, the waste. Sending children to die for causes they don't understand. Following orders from men who've forgotten why the war started." "Who are you?" I managed to ask, though my throat felt like sandpaper. The statue smiled, actually smiled, stone lips curving in an expression that was almost motherly. "I am discord," she said. "I am the necessary chaos that prevents stagnation. I am the conflict that drives growth. I am Eris, and I have been sleeping far too long." Eris. Not Medusa, not some random Greek monster. An actual goddess, if you believed in that sort of thing, which was getting harder not to, given the talking statue. "The soldiers," Martha said, finding her voice. "You killed them." "They killed themselves," Eris corrected gently. "Their minds were too small, too rigid. They couldn't accept what they'd found. So they broke, like cups trying to hold an ocean." "And us?" I asked, already knowing the answer. "You're different." Those golden eyes narrowed slightly, studying me. "You've already broken, haven't you? Already seen how pointless your precious order is. Already know that sometimes chaos is the only honest response to an insane world." My arm was burning now, the black mark spreading visibly through my sleeve. Martha saw it and stepped back, her rifle rising. "Don't," I told her, not sure if I was protecting her or the statue. "He's already mine," Eris said, sounding pleased. The mark chose him the moment he doubted his mission, the moment he wondered if saving lives in a meaningless war was worth the cost. "That's not," I started but couldn't finish, because it was true. Every word was true. "I offer understanding," Eris continued, her voice warm and inviting now. "Purpose beyond following orders, power beyond human limitation, All I ask in return is service. Service, Martha repeated flatly. You want him to serve you. I want him to serve chaos, Eris corrected. To plant seeds of discord where order has grown corrupt. To challenge systems that have forgotten their purpose. To be the necessary disruption that keeps humanity from stagnating into death. It should have sounded insane, should have sent us running. But standing there in that impossible temple, in that impossible city, with a goddess speaking through stone, insane was starting to feel relative. What happens if I refuse? I asked. The statue's expression didn't change, but something in the air grew heavier. Then you die like the others, she said simply. Your mind breaks trying to deny what you've seen. Your body fails as the mark consumes you. And your team... She didn't finish, but the threat was clear. You're holding us hostage, Martha said, anger cutting through her fear. I'm offering a choice, Eris replied. The same choice I offered the others. They chose poorly. I looked at my team. Martha, brilliant and brave, trying to process something that didn't fit any manual. Evelyn, terrified but still documenting, still doing her job. They'd followed me into this nightmare because they trusted me. Preston was still up top, already touched by whatever this was, already hearing things. If I agree, I said slowly, my team goes free, unharmed. No marks, no madness, nothing. Of course, Eris agreed easily. I only need one servant at a time, one agent of necessary chaos in your ordered little world. Sergeant, no. Martha stepped forward. We don't make deals with what? I cut her off. Gods? Monsters? Whatever she is, she's real, and she's offering us a way out. She's offering you slavery. She's offering purpose, I corrected and hated how much I meant it. The statue's eyes brightened, gold flaring like miniature suns. Choose quickly, Eris said. The mark is spreading. Soon the choice will be made for you. I looked down at my arm. The black line had reached my elbow, branching into patterns that hurt to follow. Pretty soon it would look like the marks on the dead soldiers. Unless... I need your word, I said, looking back at those impossible golden eyes. My team walks out of here unharmed. No marks, no madness, no compulsion. They live. Safe, ordered, predictable lives, if that's what you want for them. It was. God help me. It was exactly what I wanted. Let them be boring and safe and alive. Then yes, I said, and felt something shift in the world, like reality hiccuping. The statue smiled wider, and for a moment, just a moment, I could have sworn she wasn't stone at all. The statue's golden eyes held mine like gravity holds planets, impossible to escape, inevitable as falling. When she spoke again, her voice bypassed my ears entirely, blooming directly in my mind like thoughts that weren't mine but felt like they should be. You know my name, Eris said. And yeah, I did. Not because I'd studied Greek mythology or paid attention in whatever high school class covered ancient gods. I knew it the same way you know you're dreaming while you're still asleep. Knowledge that came from nowhere and everywhere at once. This city was mine, she continued, and the stone walls around us seemed to pulse with memory. Built by those who understood that order without chaos is death. They worshipped properly, not with prayers and sacrifices, but with actions that kept the world turning, kept humanity from crystallizing into predictable patterns. Martha had her rifle trained on the statue now, though we all knew how useless that was. You're saying people lived here? Underground? Not underground, then. Eris's tone carried amusement like a teacher correcting a slow student. This city stood proud beneath the sun, a beacon of controlled discord, until jealous mortals decided my influence was too dangerous. They buried my domain, sealed my temple, tried to chain chaos itself. The black line on my arm pulsed, and I understood something without being told. The burial hadn't worked. You can't imprison an idea, can't chain a force of nature. Eris had simply waited. The soldiers freed you, I said, the pieces clicking together. Their excavation broke whatever was keeping you contained. Freed is the wrong word. The statue's lips curved in what might have been sympathy. I was never truly imprisoned, merely inconvenienced. But yes, they opened the door. Poor things. Their minds were so rigid, so trained to see the world in simple terms of enemy and ally, order and chaos. When they encountered something outside their understanding, they shattered like ice in boiling water. The black veins, Evelyn whispered. That's what killed them? Divine madness, Eris confirmed, like she was discussing weather. Their bodies couldn't process my presence. Their minds couldn't accept that their entire worldview was a comfortable lie. So they died, peacefully, in their sleep, rather than face the truth of existence. I thought about those 12 soldiers lying in their bunks with those spreading marks. They'd come down here following orders, doing their duty, and died for it. Just like we might. But you're different, Eris said, those golden eyes fixed on me again. You've already seen through the lie, haven't you? Already understood that your war has no purpose. Your missions accomplish nothing. Your orders come from men who've forgotten why they're fighting. She wasn't wrong. God help me, she wasn't wrong. How many supply runs had I done to outposts that served no strategic purpose? How many soldiers had I watched die for hills we'd abandon a week later? The war had become its own purpose, a machine that existed just to keep existing. So, what do you want? I asked, though part of me already knew. I want what I've always wanted. Balance. Order is necessary, but order without opposition becomes tyranny. Peace is beautiful, but peace without conflict becomes stagnation. Humanity needs chaos to grow, to change, to avoid the slow death of predictability. You want to start wars, Martha said flatly. Wars start themselves, Eris corrected. I merely ensure they serve a purpose beyond destruction. A forest fire clears old growth for new life. A revolution topples corrupt systems. Even your meaningless war could serve purpose, if properly directed. The pull in my chest was getting stronger, like invisible hands trying to drag me toward the statue. My feet moved without permission, one step, then another. Sergeant! Martha grabbed my arm, but I shook her off. She's in my head, I told them, surprised how calm I sounded. Has been since we got here, maybe since before. Then we get you out, Martha said. Medical evacuation, psychiatric treatment, something. There is no out. I was 3 feet from the statue now, close enough to see details in the carved serpents of her hair. Look at my arm. I rolled up my sleeve, showing them the black line that now reached past my elbow, branching into patterns that seemed to move when you weren't looking directly at them. Martha's face went pale. That's what killed the soldiers, she breathed. That's what will kill me, I corrected. Unless you accept my offer, Eris finished, her voice warm and inviting. Serve as my agent in your world. Spread necessary discord where order has grown corrupt. In exchange, the mark becomes a blessing, not a curse. Power instead of poison. Power, I repeated, and hated how tempting it sounded. The power to protect those you care about, she clarified, because apparently ancient goddesses could read minds. The power to see through lies, to understand true motivations, to know which battles matter and which are meaningless. The power to be the leader you've always wanted to be, instead of the fraud you fear you are. That hit harder than it should have. She knew about my doubts, my fears, the guilt I carried like standard issue equipment. And if I refuse? Then you die. Simple, matter of fact. The mark consumes you within hours. Your team will likely survive. Their exposure has been limited. But you? You're already too far gone. I looked back at Martha and Evelyn. They were good soldiers, good people, They deserved better than dying in some underground nightmare because their sergeant had led them into something beyond human understanding. Preston was still up top, probably losing his mind with worry. Kid didn't deserve any of this. My team, I said. If I agree, they walk out of here clean. No marks, no madness, no divine influence. They get to live normal, boring, safe lives. If that's what you wish. Eris sounded amused. Though I suspect their lives will be anything but boring, knowing what they now know. She had a point. How do you go back to normal after seeing proof that gods are real and actively messing with humanity? They forget, I said. Whatever you have to do, make them forget this place, forget you, forget everything except a chemical leak that killed the soldiers. Memory is tricky, Eris warned. I can cloud, suggest, redirect, but humans have an annoying tendency to remember truths at inconvenient times. Then do your best. Sergeant, what are you doing? Martha demanded. My job, I told her. Protecting my team. I reached out and touched the statue's hand. The world exploded into sensation, colors that didn't exist, sounds that had no source, knowledge that human brains weren't meant to hold. I saw the city as it had been, full of people who danced on the edge of chaos and found joy in uncertainty. I saw its burial, the fear in the eyes of those who couldn't accept that discord was necessary. I saw centuries of waiting, of patience, of planning, and I saw myself, not as I was, but as I could be. A warrior who understood that sometimes destruction was creation, that sometimes chaos was kindness. Someone who could plant seeds of necessary discord that would grow into change. The mark on my arm flared with cold fire, spreading another inch, but then stopping, stabilizing. Instead of consuming me, it settled into my skin like it belonged there. It's done, Eris said, and her voice was gentler now, almost maternal. You are mine, and I am yours. When the time comes, you'll know what to do. When what time comes? You'll know, she repeated. For now, take your team and leave. Tell whatever lies necessary to protect them. Live your life as normally as you can, knowing that normal is an illusion. And when I call, answer. The golden eyes closed, and suddenly she was just a statue again. Just carved stone in an impossible temple in an impossible city. But the mark on my arm remained, dark and real and pulsing with my heartbeat. We need to go, I said, turning back to my team. Martha and Evelyn were staring at me like I'd grown a second head. What just happened? Martha demanded. What did you do? I made a choice, I said. Now we leave. We report a chemical leak, and we never speak of this again. You can't be serious. I'm your commanding officer, and I'm giving you a direct order. I used my sergeant voice, the one that made privates jump. We leave, now. They followed, because that's what good soldiers do. But I could see the questions in their eyes, the doubt, the fear. They'd seen too much to simply forget, despite whatever influence Eris might exert. As we climbed back through the tunnels, I felt her presence fade but not disappear. She was there, in the back of my mind, patient and eternal, waiting for the right moment to call in her debt. I'd saved my team, probably, given them a chance at normal lives, hopefully. But I'd also agreed to serve chaos itself, to become an agent of discord in a world that was already pretty screwed up. Walking back toward the light of the regular world, I wondered if I'd just prevented a disaster or caused one. Probably both. That seemed like Eris's style. The mark on my arm pulsed once, like agreement, and I knew my life as a simple soldier was over. Whatever came next, whatever she asked of me, I'd face it. Because that's what you do when you make a deal with a goddess. You live with the consequences, even if living means becoming something you never wanted to be. The tunnel entrance spat us out like we'd been swallowed and rejected. I stumbled into daylight that felt wrong after the gray, nothing light of Eris's temple, and immediately heard Preston's voice crack with relief. Sergeant, Jesus Christ, where were you? He was standing by the Humvee, rifle in shaking hands, looking ready to either shoot something or throw up. You were gone for 3 hours. Martha was about to call in the whole damn cavalry. 40 minutes. It had felt like hours down there, or seconds. Time got weird when you were making deals with ancient gods. Chemical weapons, I said, the lie coming out smooth as water. Old Soviet-era stuff, probably. Nerve agent storage that got compromised when the soldiers broke through the tunnel walls. Martha was already moving toward me, her analytical mind switching gears. Chemical weapons? Are we contaminated? We need decon procedures, medical evaluation. It's contained to the lower chambers. I cut her off, pulling my sleeve down to cover the mark that now reached past my elbow. The seals held mostly, but the soldiers who opened that inner door got a full dose. Explains the synchronized deaths, the way they all went down at once. It was a good lie. Believable. The Soviets had left all kinds of nasty surprises in Afghanistan during their occupation. Chemical weapons turning up in old mountain storage sites wouldn't even make the top 10 weirdest things found this year. We need to report this immediately, Martha said. But something in her eyes was different. She was watching me like she was seeing me for the first time, noticing something off but unable to name it. Base needs to know. Already handled, I said, moving toward the Outpost's storage shed I'd noticed earlier. We're sealing that tunnel. Every fob keeps demo charges for emergency situations. There should be some in that storage shed. Since when do you make that call? Martha challenged, but there was less heat in it than usual, like she was going through the motions of questioning authority without really meaning it. Since I found 12 dead soldiers killed by something that could take out our entire base if it spreads, I said, meeting her eyes steadily. The confidence in my voice surprised me. Usually I second-guessed every decision, worried about whether I was making the right call. Now I just knew. We seal it, we report it, we let the specialists handle it. Preston was staring at my arm. Sergeant, you're bleeding through your sleeve. I looked down. The mark was visible through the fabric, dark lines spreading like spilled ink. Not blood, but he didn't need to know that. Caught it on some rebar in the tunnel, I said. Margaret, you mind taking a look? Preston was already calling for Margaret. Doc, the sergeant's hurt. His arm's bleeding bad. Margaret emerged from checking the Humvee's supplies. Medical kit already in hand. Professional instincts overriding questions. Sit. Let me see. I sat on the Humvee's tailgate while she rolled up my sleeve. The mark was beautiful in its own twisted way. Black lines branching into patterns that seemed to shift when you weren't looking directly at them. Margaret frowned, prodding at it with latex-covered fingers. This doesn't look like a laceration, she said slowly. More like, I don't know. Severe bruising, chemical burn maybe. Probably from whatever killed the soldiers, I said. Minor exposure when I was examining the scene. She cleaned it with alcohol that did nothing, applied antibiotic cream that was pointless, and wrapped it in gauze that at least hid it from view. Her hands were steady, professional, but I caught her glancing at my face with the same expression Martha had, like something fundamental had changed, and she couldn't quite identify what. While Margaret worked, I had Preston and Evelyn help me rig the charges. We placed them carefully at the tunnel entrance, enough explosive to bring down tons of rock without damaging the rest of the outpost. The dead soldiers would need to be retrieved eventually, but not by us. Not today. Evelyn, get on the radio, I ordered. Tell base we've completed the supply delivery, but discovered chemical contamination at the site. Recommend immediate quarantine protocols and specialized recovery teams. She nodded, already adjusting her equipment. The radio crackled to life. Apparently, we were far enough from Eris's influence for electronics to work again. Chapman Base, this is Mobile Unit 7. Mission complete with complications. Break. I listened to her deliver the report with clinical precision, noting how easily the lie spread. Base accepted it without question. Of course, there were chemical weapons in the mountains. Of course, the soldiers had died from exposure. It made so much more sense than the truth. While Evelyn handled communications, I went back to the barracks one last time. The bodies lay exactly as we'd left them. Black veins spread across their skin like they'd been tattooed by death itself. I gathered their notebooks, their excavation logs, every scrap of evidence about what they'd really found. "What are you doing?" Martha had followed me, because of course she had. "Protecting them," I said, stuffing papers into a burn bag. "Their families don't need to know they died because they dug too deep and found something that shouldn't exist. Let them think it was chemical weapons. Clean, simple, heroic in its own way. That's not your call to make. It is now." I turned to face her, and something in my expression made her step back. "They're dead, Martha. Nothing we do changes that, but we can control how they're remembered." She watched me burn the evidence in a metal trash can, all those careful notes and drawings turning to ash and smoke. When I was done, only the official duty logs remained, sanitized, normal, boring. "You're different," she said quietly. "Something happened down there. Something you're not telling us." "Chemical exposure can cause personality changes," I said. "Probably just adrenaline and stress. I'll get checked when we're back at base." Another lie, smooth as the first. I was getting good at this. We loaded up and left OP-31 as the sun started its descent toward the mountains. Preston drove again, steadier now that we were leaving, though he kept glancing at me in the rearview mirror. Margaret sat beside him, watching him closely for signs of distress like she was worried he might collapse. Martha and Evelyn were in the back with me, silent and thoughtful. As we drove away, I triggered the charges. The explosion echoed through the mountains, and when the dust cleared, the tunnel entrance was gone. Tons of rock sealed whatever lay beneath, though I knew it wouldn't keep Eris contained. She'd been patient for centuries. She could wait a little longer. "Base confirms quarantine protocols activated," Evelyn reported. "They're sending a specialized team in 72 hours. They'd find the sealed tunnel, the dead soldiers, and evidence of chemical weapons that didn't quite exist. They'd write reports, notify families, and move on. The war would continue its pointless grind, and nobody would know that underneath that mountain, a goddess of chaos waited in her impossible city. Nobody except us. And if Eris kept her promise, even that knowledge would fade, becoming something half-remembered, like a dream you couldn't quite recall. The mark on my arm pulsed with my heartbeat, hidden under gauze and lies. I could feel her there, not speaking but present, like background music too quiet to make out the words. She'd call when she was ready. Until then, I had to pretend to be the same Sergeant Armstrong who'd driven up this morning. "You okay, Sergeant?" Preston asked, catching my eye in the mirror. "Yeah," I said, and meant it. For the first time in years, maybe for the first time ever, I felt okay. Not good, not happy, but okay. Like I finally understood my purpose, even if that purpose was serving chaos itself. "Just ready to get home," I added, which was true enough. Home to Fob Chapman, where I'd file false reports and pretend everything was normal. Home to a war that made no sense, serving commanders who'd forgotten why we were fighting. Home to a life that was about to become a lot more complicated. The sun set behind us as we descended from the mountains, painting the sky in reds and purples that looked like warning signs, or promises. Hard to tell the difference anymore. Margaret checked my bandage one more time, frowning at how the gauze seemed to darken where it touched the mark. "You need to get this looked at properly when we're back," she said. "This isn't normal bruising." "Nothing about today was normal," I said, which was probably the most honest thing I'd said since emerging from that tunnel. She nodded slowly, accepting that if nothing else. We drove through the darkness that swallowed the mountains, past the site of the morning's ambush where the blood had already been covered by dust, past the dead goats that would feed scavengers tonight. The war continued around us, indifferent to what we'd found and lost and become. In the back of my mind, patient as stone and inevitable as gravity, Eris waited. And I waited with her, knowing my life as a simple soldier following simple orders was over forever. Whatever came next, whatever she asked of me, I'd be ready. Because that's what you do when you've been marked by chaos. You adapt, you survive, and you serve your new purpose, even if that purpose is spreading discord in a world that's already falling apart. The mark pulsed once under its bandages like approval, and I closed my eyes for the rest of the drive home.